Hey everybody, I just wanted to get on here and make a video update what's going on with Verdi. Um, I'll probably still summarize later, but sometimes it's just easier to make a video first so I don't, you know, forget anything. I'll probably still forget something. But anyways, so a lot of y'all know she was in the ICU at Baylor and she got discharged and went to her scheduled epilepsy monitoring unit appointment. Um, just to back it up a little bit for people that are not familiar, how it all originally started was last Thursday. She went to a scheduled MRI in Fort Worth for they were looking more closely at her brain to rule out any kind of tumors or anything physical that could be causing seizure activity. Good news is they didn't find anything acutely concerning. There's some stuff that has been there, but nothing new. So that's good news. But the I guess you could say the bad part is right after she was done with the MRI, she started having seizure like activity. They called me and said, "Hey, how long does this normally last?" I was like, "Well, sometimes it can last an hour." And their protocol was to call the ambulance. I get it. And at that point in time, we didn't have any other we don't have any paperwork saying, "Hey, don't take her to the ER." But yeah, that visit escalated pretty quickly. I wasn't there. Her sister took her. So from the account that I have is that, the ambulance was called. She was having seizure-like activity and they gave her, anticonvulsants. And she was still struggling, to wake up and be responsive, which is what we've seen in the past. And from what I can gather, even after they did all of that, they noticed that she was hypoxic, meaning her oxygen level was low. And the more concerning thing was her blood pressure was really low. I haven't seen actual numbers yet, but I talked to like a physician at the hospital that they took her to, and she was very concerned that it was like, life threatening low. It wasn't like a little bit. So they had to put her in the ICU and put her on medication to, artificially bring her blood pressure up. And they did that, and lo and behold, like we've seen in the past, it swung back up to, critical highs. And she was continuing to have the seizure activity. So in order to get her stabilized, because they were literally worried about her, moving on to the next life, right? They decided to intubate her to make sure that her airway stabilized. And I think that was the right call with all the stuff that was going on, because Verdi has a lot of different things going on that make her more high risk. And I think intubation was appropriate there. Even if, there was another explanation for the hypoxia, she just needed to be stabilized. And that intubation allowed them to really sedate her and just kind of do a reset, right? And she was only intubated for, 2 days, maybe a day and a half. Nobody wants to be intubated. It's really hard on the body. It's painful, scary. But after they stabilized her, she started becoming more aware, and they were like, "Hey, let's get this out of her. She doesn't need it." And she spent a couple more days at Baylor. And let's see, really there wasn't much to treat after they stabilized her. We talked to the neurologist. They did another continuous EEG, and I mean, we expected this, but they didn't find any activity that was epilepsy related. Not a surprise. But I did get to talk to that neurologist in person and kind of explain, hey, we're not like anti, it's not epileptic. Like, that wasn't the argument. That we weren't saying, hey, it's definitely epilepsy. Like, obviously it's not epilepsy. My concern was, I think there's definitely evidence of psychogenic seizures, because that's kind of the go-to if it's not epilepsy. But there's an abundance of documentation in labs that have been abnormal from MRIs, um, heart caths, echocardiograms, blood pressures all over the place. Just evidence that points to maybe there is something else going on, probably like autonomic related. I mean, she's had critically high intracranial pressures 3 times, and 2 of the times they removed fluid, not just for like testing, but therapeutically to help relieve symptoms. At one point, the pressure was like 3 times what's normal. That's no bueno. But yeah, it just that could be related to dialysis. Probably is, but someone needs to pay attention to it. There needs to be adjustments made, right? But yeah, they got her stabilized there, and they knew that there was a pretty important test that needed to be done at UT. So they're like, hey, let's get her out of here. And, it was a day-long debacle, but we got it done. That's a whole other story in itself. But, yeah, we got to the EMU unit at UT. It was phenomenal. If you live in Texas and you're near the DFW area, I know it's a long wait, but if you have complex medical care, that is the place to be in our region. I mean, of course, Houston and Austin all have really nice medical facilities, but for where we're at, UT makes sense. But yeah, the whole purpose of that stay was to basically try to give her a seizure, and it didn't take long. We're talking maybe a few hours into it. They brought this light in and played some music, or it wasn't music, it was more like a siren sound. And they like would turn it on and turn it off, and she had a seizure for a good 15 minutes, completely unresponsive, which is typically what we see. She was eventually able to be kind of woken up. I have a different opinion about the way it was characterized, but I mean, I'm also not an epilepsy professional. But the point is, it wasn't epilepsy. They looked at the brain activity during that. They were able to capture some good data, and they just verified, yeah, this is not epilepsy. And basically, the diagnosis that they're sitting on right now, which I like I said, I don't know if that's the full story, but they're saying it's psychogenic seizures or functional neurological disorder, and they have referred her to a clinic that specializes in FND. That's a big deal. There's, I think, 2 or 3 clinics in the whole state of Texas, and like under 20 physicians that specialize in that for like 40 million people. So yeah, expect to wait. And her appointment's actually in October, which is actually not that bad. I know it sounds terrible, but for what she's dealing with, that's actually pretty soon. And totally, yeah, she should see an F&D clinic, because, I mean, objectively, she's been through a lot of trauma. I mean, before anything paramedic, or before anything, not paramedic, medical, like her own medical situation, she worked as a paramedic, and she saw a lot of people, expire on the job. She saw a lot of trauma. So that standing alone is definitely a contributor to some psychological trauma, for sure. And she needs to have some therapy to help with that. That's great standing alone on its own. But that didn't erase the autonomic instability that's well documented, or the MRI findings, or any of that other stuff that just doesn't seem to be included, just because the way that medicine works sometimes is you kind of get this hot potato effect where, well, it's not epilepsy, next, and there's not really communication between the different specialists. And that's not always necessary, but Verdi's got a lot going on, and I think in this case, that's something like that is going to have to happen. She's not, the norm. She's not even like 90 percentile, right? She's like in that top 5% that needs some extra attention, medical. And I expressed that to the neurologist, who was amazing because I wasn't there when they came and kind of told her what was going on. I was doing some laundry, and I was like, man, I really want to talk to the neurologist, and I wanted to, talk to a care coordinator because I knew that, having the hot potato effect where people were ruling out what they knew and sending her on to the next thing and doing their best there was not an effective strategy. And I talked to the neurologist and I said, hey, so there's nobody like owning her care right now. She does have a PCP back in Abilene, but I think that for this situation, she needs some like an academic institution like UT where everyone is under one roof, right? That's kind of how really big academic institutions do it. They have all their specialists under one roof. They can literally walk down the hall and talk to another specialist, and they can all have their academic discussions, right? And she completely agreed. She recommended that, and that was like a 10-minute conversation. And she at the end of it said, "Hey, let's get you a PCP that has privileges at UT. Check, done." And Verdi has an appointment next week, so that's insane. Like, a lot of people wait a long time. I'm just saying. So a week is crazy for UT. And then what else? She also, because I expressed my concerns about the autonomic stuff, and she was like, "Yeah, no, that definitely needs to be investigated." So she referred Verdi to an autonomic clinic. That one's probably going to be a wait because, again, that's another thing where we're talking like under 20 specialists in the whole state for some reason. I don't think we've got a call on that one yet, but yeah, they can do more detailed stuff, look at stuff like POTS and dysautonomia. She does have orthostatic hypotension documented in her record now. First time I've seen it, I'm like, oh, thank goodness it's actually in there now. There's a lot of new stuff after going to UT that has never been in there before that I've expressed concerns about over and over. So it's like a switch turned on. It's really weird how that works when you go to an academic institution. It's not all about money. They're there to treat people, and they do it very well. So yeah, we got more done in that like 10-minute discussion with that one neurologist than anybody locally or even at Baylor in Dallas had really done for us in at least 2 years. I'm not sure if that has more to do with my approach or the type of institution. I'm not really sure, to be honest. I guess because there was a definitive answer that this is definitely not epilepsy, then they felt like it was time to, investigate a little further. Who knows? But the point is, we're on the right track. And I did consider, I was like, well, if we have this diagnosis, do we still need to go to Mayo Clinic? And I was thinking about that, and I was like, well, it could still be a while before we get Verdi into the autonomic clinic. And I know they're going to do some really detailed heart, some cardiac testing. And I think they might be doing what's it called, a table test, which, is a way to really confirm, hey, there's like POTS going on or something like that. And it's going to be more comprehensive. So I think it's still important to do all that. And the way that a place like Mayo approaches things, they kind of stop diagnostic momentum and they kind of start from scratch, which is, that's kind of what UT did too. They saw what had been done, like, okay, let's do things in-house. So we have two super, super mega prestigious tertiary centers now looking at Verdi. And the response has been really interesting because I've heard it's really hard to get into both of those places. And I don't know if it's just because of her, the risk, like how critical she is or the amount of data or whatever. But it seems like people at academic institutions are super interested at getting her in there, which I really appreciate. Uh, but yeah, we'll be headed to Jacksonville. There's a Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville. I have an Army buddy there that I haven't seen in, I don't know, 15, probably almost 20 years now. Gosh, I'm getting old. But yeah, so we'll see him and go get that testing done. It's like 4 or 5 days of testing. So it's gonna be a lot. It's not gonna be fun for Verdi, but I think it's also pretty necessary. But I think we're closing in on definitive answers, and a lot of the stuff that is a possibility and what has been diagnosed is not easily treated. It's actually harder to treat something like psychogenic seizures than it is to treat epilepsy, because with epilepsy generally you can just prescribe medication and it's almost resolved, right, for the most part. Psychogenic seizures, there's no medication. There's therapies and behavior modifications, that kind of stuff that you can do. I think cognitive behavior therapy is one. But yeah, no medication yet. And I kind of feel like F&D as a diagnosis has the potential to kind of make even the best doctors prematurely close a case, because I've seen doctors kind of characterize it as like largely psychiatric because of the word psychogenic, right? And the lack of electrical epilepsy activity. And I would argue that if someone is hypoxic and they have intracranial pressure that's putting pressure on their brain, that's going to create, an alternate status. That's going to create a situation where there are psychiatric appearing symptoms that are not psychiatric. It's if your brain is not getting oxygen, you probably ain't going to be talking right. And I've seen that happen multiple times where it's hard to understand what Verdi's saying, and even a day afterwards, she's still talking kind of slow. She's confused. She doesn't remember what happened. And for someone that is not paying close enough attention, that might seem like a psychiatric issue. I don't see it that way. So I think in this case, it's definitely okay. We accept psychogenic diagnosis, and there is something else going on. So that's where we're at. Verdi is, of course, home now. And we're going to. Oh, one important thing is the neurologist that we spoke to basically emphasized that Verdi does not need to go to the ER for these seizures, right? They'll resolve on their own. And she emphasized that Verdi does not need to be intubated for these events. And it's kind of complicated because there has been times where there was a medical emergency coinciding with the seizures, like the hypoxia or the really low blood pressure. So we're going to work with her dialysis clinic and her her nephrologist or kidney doctor to kind of set some parameters on what makes sense. Like, hey, if her blood pressure is within this range and her oxygen is within this range, just keep her there, keep her safe. It'll resolve. Or if it's outside these parameters, yeah, okay, call an ambulance. So that will prevent a lot of these unnecessary trips where it's basically torture for Verdi. They do the same tests over and over again that we already know the answer to. Tell her she's med seeking, ironically, even though when she's not even going there by choice. It's another medical institution sending her there. But yeah, we want to avoid that at all costs because, to be frank, this regional hospital, they just they're not equipped to handle someone like Verdi. And that's not like me trying to down them. It's just Verdi's situation is way above what they're equipped for. Yeah. And it's as simple as that. It's nothing trying to talk trash about that hospital. It's just that's not what they're built for. So we have to go other places, and that's what we're doing. But anyways, I've been talking for a long time. If you're still here, cool. But now you know what's been going on, what the plan is. Thank you for your support. It's been so helpful. We really appreciate it. Stay safe out there.